G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here with the second video in this build series of the 1000 Space Battleship Yamato from Bandai. And of course this is from the 2202 series. This episode is going to be all about the electronics, and I'm going to start with the lighting. And I've spent a number of hours looking at the lighting options and what I want to light up and what I can't light up, because I want to do a lot more lighting than what's supplied with the kit. So I want to start by introducing the different types of LED lighting I'll be using, and this is by no means final. It might change as I go, but it's a good place to start. So the first thing I want to talk about is the standard sort of little warm white 0603 3-volt LEDs that I use. These are pretty ubiquitous. I use these on lots of my model kits. They're just a warm white LED, they're nice and bright, and they're pre-wired, so they're nice and easy to implement. So I'll be using some of these, but probably most of the lighting I will be using RGB LEDs. So they're LEDs that allow you to change the colour. And more specifically, the ones I'll be using are these WS2812 RGB LEDs. Now, these are great for modeling, and the reason for that is because they come in a lot of different sort of packages. They're also, you can change the color, but the other thing that's great about them is they're addressable, and this is something I'm going to go into a bit more detail later on. But what that means is that if you have a strip of them like these, you can say set this one over here to red, you can set this one over here to green or blue or whatever, and you can have them each individually controlled, even though they're sort of all in a strip like this. So this is an example of, now at the time of filming this, this was the smallest strip lighting I could find that was these RGB addressable LEDs. So this stuff is really quite narrow, and it packs in quite a number of RGB LEDs in a small space. You can see those lines there, so every 5 LEDs there's a line. That means I can cut them there, and I can solder them, you know, use them in bits. I don't have to use the whole strip. Now these things use 5 volts, so I am going to have to sort of work out how I'm going to power them. They're going to be controlled using an Arduino. Arduino is just a, think of it as a very small computer, very basic sort of computer. It's not very powerful, but it can do a number of things like basic control of LEDs and a few other things. So they'll be controlled by that, but I will need to provide a separate sort of voltage. I can't just draw the voltage from the Arduino. So I'll be using these sort of strip RGB LEDs. They also come in individual little packages. I can sort of show these. So you see they've got like 4 little legs poking out the side of them, and basically those 4 legs, you've got a positive, a negative, but you also have a data in and a data out. And the data in, data out is the way you can sort of say, okay, I want RGB LED number 7 to turn green, but I want number 3 to turn red. So you can wire these up individually. They come in smaller packages than this, but I just can't solder them myself. So these ones are about as small as you can get that I can solder, and I can sort of solder these up for areas where I only need 1 LED. I don't actually need a whole strip of them. And of course they come in these tapes. This is for a pick and place machine, and you just buy them by the you know, by the tens or hundreds or thousands, how many ever you need. So that's a little bit of an introduction into the types of LEDs I'm going to use, and just to show you how they look. This is an Arduino called a Seed. It's like a very small version of Arduino, so but any Arduino board will be able to control these LEDs. So here's an example of the small package You can see it just flashing there at the moment. I've got it sort of as a bluey colour. That's the other thing, you can turn them on and off, you can change their brightness, so you've got a real lot of control. And given that the Yamato has, you know, things like thrusters and the wave motion gun and that sort of thing, I do want to be able to control the colour of them. So that's what the single one looks like. If I show you what the RGB strip looks like, you can see that even though there's 5 LEDs on here, I've only lit up 3 of them. So it's just to sort of show you that you've got a lot more sort of control over them. But so these were, you know, this is experimental code that I was using because I want to use these for some of the guns on the ship. Okay, so they're the LEDs. The next step is to look at the different parts of the kit that I've modified and the modifications I've made and why I've done that. One of the first steps in the kit is to build up this assembly, which is basically the chassis that holds together the hull, but it also has a clear light pipe that sort of flows all the way through here, and this is for the wave motion gun at the front. I'm going to leave this pretty much as it is. It is set up so that you drop an LED unit in the back here, and there's a hole that you can see if it'll focus. You can see that square hole there. There's a bit of clear plastic that runs all the way through to the front. Light pipe there. So if I put this flashing LED in the right spot, you can see how that's lighting up at the front. So all I'll be doing is just wiring up one of the single RGB LEDs sort of right over that hole there. So that part is nice and straightforward. The next bit is the rear of the ship, and there are a number of extra plastic kit bits that sort of go in here that I just won't need. There's sort of a cover that goes over this clear piece. So I've basically done away with all that because I won't need it. And again, I'll be using a single RGB LED, and it will fit into the hole at the back, and you can see that that works perfectly fine for the main thruster. And then for the 2 smaller thrusters, we've got a separate light pipe here which I can put a LED against, and if I can get it set up right, you can see how light pipes work there. So thankfully these 2 engine components are nice and easy for me to implement just with the single RGB LEDs. It also means I'll be able to have the main thruster, you know, running at a running independently of the 2 smaller ones, because in the show you sometimes see they might have the smaller ones on but not the large one at the back, so it gives me a lot of flexibility there. In order to light up a lot of the guns on the ship, I need to use some fibre optics in order to replace the barrels that come on the guns. And it's not a perfect solution, but it will allow me to light up a lot of the smaller guns. So I'm going to start with sort of the first type of gun, which is these multiple barrel ones on these turrets. They are incredibly small and fiddly, but you can see they've got a little bit of detail sort of in the barrel. The barrel's not just a straight, you know, or a tapered barrel. It's actually got some detail on it, which, you know, kind of feels as though it's probably a little bit out of scale. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I've got to replace it. So the structure of these particular guns are each pair of barrels comes on a separate piece, which is fun and games. And then when you look at the actual turret, you've sort of got these 2 holes here. So what I've done is I've gone down the path of grinding out that sort of content in the middle there. There's a shine to this one because the next step is to put some UV resin in there, and what that does is that gives me a base to drill holes to put some fibre optic in to replace the barrels. So to show you what that looks like, this one's a bit rough. The fibre optic's not super straight yet, but you kind of get an idea of what's going on there. So it is very difficult to see. So the idea is that the fibre optics get painted with the rest of the ship, and then I just snip off the very end, and that way the light will be able to shine sort of out the end of the barrel. Now, as far as where these go on the ship, actually before I do that, I should talk about what size I'm using. So I'm using 0.5mm fibre optic, and this stuff is tiny. It is really, you know, quite fiddly to work with. And the other thing is, when it comes on a roll, of course it's curved, which, you know, you can sort of see. Where's my example here? You know, you can see that these are on a little bit of an angle, and that's because of the curvature of the actual fibre optic. So in order to straighten them out, and this is a trick I picked up from someone else on YouTube, it's not my idea, but what I've done is I've taken a bit of aluminium tube, and so, you know, just a hollow bit of tube, and I've packed it with a whole lot of bits of fibre optic. I've boiled the kettle and dunked this in hot water for about 10-15 seconds, and then pull it out, leave it to dry, and then when you pull the fibre optics out, they're nice and straight. So for the purpose of what I'm sort of showing you at the moment, it's very much the, you know, I'm just using fibre optics. I've cut off the reel, so to speak. So if they're not perfectly straight, that's the reason why. Now the issue is getting light into these things. So once I've got the fibre optics sort of in place, I need to get light under here so that I can actually light up the end of those fibre optics. Now if we look at the deck here, you can see that I've done a lot of grinding out. There's a whole piece in here that I've sort of taken out just because it's not needed for the custom lighting I'm doing. Some of this stuff is needed if you are using the LEDs that come with the kit, but I've basically taken all that out, so you can sort of see there's a, you know, I haven't sort of done this side yet, but you can see how much I've taken out. I've also drilled out these 3 holes here. You can see this is where these guns need to go, and you see compared to the other side, I've actually drilled them out quite a bit. And the reason for that is to allow a big hole here that light is able to travel into. So it's probably easy to see on the top the difference between what we've got here and what we've got on the other side. So these are the same types of guns, but you can see the modification I've made. Now if I put the deck on and clip it to the side, you can see there's a little bit of a shelf underneath there, and that's where I plan to use one of the LED strips to sort of put under here, and then the light will sort of travel up and into that turret. So let me get that set up and I can sort of show you how that's going to look. Alright, what I've done is I've temporarily sort of put the strip in there so you can sort of see where the strip is going to be located. And then if I put and I've kind of just jerry-rigged where the turret's going. It's a little bit hard to tell because of the rest of the clear area, but there is actually light being transmitted to the very end of the barrels. And so that's the way I'm going to light these very small gun barrels. Now, out of the smaller gun barrels, or the smaller turrets that I'm actually lighting, these are probably the most difficult just because they do have the 4 barrels coming out of them. So the other ones are a little bit more straightforward. Well, I say that with a, you know, with an asterisk, because the way that I've done this is I've actually glued the turrets in place. So there's these ones are a little bit different. They actually only have 2 barrels coming out of them. So I've actually glued these in place, and then what I do is I drill the holes down into underneath here, so the LED strip will have light that will travel up the fibre optics out the end of the barrels of these ones. So to show you an example of that, here are the ones mounted on the side, and you can see I've cut the barrels off and I've drilled 0.5mm holes through all the way through the back. I've also ground off a little bit of the back here, but that LED strip that will sit there, the light will transfer from there to the fibre optics and come out the end of these barrels. It's not going to be perfect, but I think it's the best option that I have as far as sort of lighting these very small gun barrels. And of course there's gun barrels all over the place. So we've got sort of these ones up here. I've drilled the holes in those as well. They sort of go all the way through. You can see this is the, you know, the bridge sort of stands up here, and this is at the back. You've got the surface to air missiles on the back here. I've had to grind out a lot of the back area here in order to be able to get, you know, basically drill through so I can feed the fibre optics through. So a lot of the light transfer, it's not being done like the traditional way of doing fibre optics where you would have them all go to a single point of light. This one's going to be a little bit different. So that's the sort of smaller guns, and there are quite a number of those. There are also a couple on the bridge here, like these ones that stick out the side. So again, I've drilled holes through the back and they come out the other side where I'll be able to light them. Not all the small turrets I'll be able to light. Some of them are going to be really tricky to do. For example, there's a couple that go on the back here, but it's going to be really problematic to try and light those, so I'm not going to worry about those. Also, this spot here is like a 3-barrel gun, and I probably won't be doing that as well, just because it's sort of 3 barrels and it's getting very sort of awkward in there. So not all the guns will be lit, but most of them will be. I foolishly thought that I could do a little bit more with the lighting on the bridge as well. The bridge is sort of designed, it's got multiple parts to it, but the main pieces are the front and the back. And the way they've set it up in the kit is that it will, the LED kit that comes with it will light up this deck and this deck here, but it won't light up the captain's room at the top. So I had to work out a way. First of all, I want to sort of set it up so I've got a bit of flexibility over, you know, lighting the 3 different areas. And on top of that, I've got to contend with the fact that I've got a barrel down, I've got guns down the bottom here which I'm going to light. And there's also pieces that sort of slide in here that kind of block the path of light going up. So I couldn't just, you know, I thought, oh, I could just use one LED like what they've done, you know, using the LED provided in the kit. I could just have one that goes up, but it's not going to sort of work like that. So I've had to do quite a bit of modifications. The first thing I did was I ground out a lot of the internals of this front piece of the deck, so you can see all of that that's taken out. There's actually 2 big sort of post holes in there that I've taken right out because I won't need them as far as putting this together. It seemed a little bit over engineered in the first place, but anyway, I've taken all that out. I've left the, what I'm calling the shelves in here for the light pipes that come with the kit that go in there, but everything else I've sort of ground out the sides. I've done the same thing for the back as well, so you can see that I've taken out a lot of content, you know, in this bottom bit. The other thing I want to do is I want to light up this little back dome here. Now I thought this would be pretty straightforward, and boy was I wrong. So there's a molded plastic dome here, and I have drilled that out, ground it out and cut it out. And I had to be very careful because obviously I didn't want to make it any bigger than what it already was. And I thought, oh, I could just use a bit of UV resin or, you know, something to create that window. And it turned out I was sort of overthinking it. What I ended up using was a bit of clear sprue. So if I plug this in, you'll be able to see what's going on. Okay, so there's my clear bit of sprue. I've sort of got to work out what I want to do at the back. But I think once that's lit, that's going to be a lot better solution. The UV resin, I did a few tests and it wasn't giving me the perfect sort of dome, so using a bit of clear sprue made all the difference. This is why you don't throw out clear sprues, or you shouldn't really throw out any of your sprues until you've sort of finished the build. So what I've done is I've taken a section that already has sort of a dome in it. So this is like a bent piece here, and I've just snipped a bit of that off, and then I have sanded it down on one side. So you can sort of see it's like a semi-circle shape, and I've literally just sanded one side so it's flat. So it's a sort of half a cylinder. Took a little bit of work, it was a bit fiddly just because of the size of it, but it has actually, I think it'll work really well. So that was one thing I had to do on the back piece as well, was sort of grind out a bit of the plastic there to allow for the custom light pipe I've made. Alright, so the light pipes that are included basically look like this. They're sort of cone shaped, I guess, to allow for fitting in with the window frames. So they sort of slot in, and what that allows me to do is put an individual RGB LED on each one of these little light pipes here. So let's see if I can light one of them up so you can sort of see how that works. Okay, so you can sort of see how that works. Now the top one, you see the light transference is not as good, so I will have to put another LED sort of at the top here to allow for that one. So there will be two RGB LEDs for those decks. And the other problem I had was this piece here actually had a whole lot of plastic on this side here that prevented me from basically feeding any wires through or setting up any LEDs. So I had to actually cut a lot of plastic out of this bit, and it's just sort of held together by this very narrow bit of plastic there. So that slots in up here. But you can see that allows me to attach an LED to that top clear plastic part. Now as far as the captain's room goes, I had to drill a hole at the very top here because the kit doesn't appear to allow any light transference to go all the way to the top. So I drilled out a very small hole there for the captain's room or observation chamber, whatever it is. I had to drill a hole in the bottom here. So that way we're going to get at least a little bit of light transference up into the clear bit here. And that goes on there. Here's a little bit tricky to see, but there is at least a little bit of light coming up into that captain's area. Of course it's just flashing at the moment because that's just the way I've got it programmed, but it will be a solid colour. So I'm not really sure how well that's going to work until I've sort of got it all painted up and everything, but it's still better than nothing. And then of course we've got this array that plugs in the top here, and so I do account for that for everything as well. So there's quite a lot sort of going on in the deck or on the bridge, so I've had to make quite a few sort of modifications in order to allow for the custom lighting job I want to do. Next up we have these, what I'm calling the mid-size guns. So there's two of these, one on the front, one on the back of the ship, and, well, I should say facing the rear and the front. They're made up of 3 barrels. We've got the top piece, and then there's a bottom piece in here. Taking the bottom piece off, you can see that the barrels sort of, they just clip onto a bar that sort of goes across, and then there's this detail here to hold on the backing piece. So in order to light this up, I've gone down a slightly different path. I'm still using the 0.5mm fiber optics, and of course these aren't straight because I haven't straightened them, but essentially all I've done is I've drilled a hole straight through, so you can see the LEDs, you can see the fiber optics sort of poking out there. So they actually get, so you can see the sort of the bars still there, but the fiber optics will be sort of over the top of them. It is not ideal given that you no longer have any of the detail of the barrels, but it's the best I think I'm going to be able to do for this particular scale. Actually working on all the cannons or all the guns for this kit makes me realize that I think the 1/500th or 350th scale you would be able to do a lot more with the lighting. Just at this 1/1000 scale, it's still just that bit too small to sort of light everything up. But anyway, we're getting there. Now for lighting this one, I'm not actually going to be able to fit an RGB LED in here. So what I've ended up doing is attaching one of the very small just warm white LEDs, and you can see I've had to grind out a bit on that platform there, and then I've got the wire sort of feeding down into where the turret joins up with the deck. So when I put this together, and you can see a light coming out the end of the barrels there. Now I've got some light leakage happening, but I'll be able to fix that up no problem. So, and of course those barrels are way longer than they're supposed to be. They're also very crooked, but you get the idea. I've glued in what is called the fourth bridge. I think I mistakenly called it something else, but it's the fourth bridge. And for this particular bit you get two options. You get one where the shutter's closed, or this one where it's open. So I've gone with the one that's open, and I'm going to drill out the holes for the windows, and I'm going to throw some LEDs behind that, so just to give it a little bit more lighting at the back of the ship. And I've got plenty of room in here for that lighting. So I just want to talk a little bit about the choices of Arduino boards I have. So an Arduino is just a microprocessor. Think of it as a very small sort of computer, and it allows you to control what they call pins, and you can control the turn a pin on or off as far as supplying voltage to it. And just with that you can actually control LEDs, you can control motors, you can do a whole lot of things with these microprocessors. So I've got a couple of different sizes here just to sort of talk about, you know, why I've gone down the option I have. First of all, there's the Uno, and if you look at this sort of compared to like the deck, for example, you can see there is no way this is going to fit in a in the Yamato model itself. However, it may be an option if you want to make a custom base for it, because the good thing about Uno is it does have a dedicated power supply, and it has a lot of pins that you can utilize, both digital and analog, and it's a really good solid performer. Like these things are almost unbreakable. I've been using these for years. So that's the Arduino Uno. For me, I want something smaller. I actually want to put the Arduinos in the Yamato itself. So the other option I've considered is a Nano, and essentially this has the same capability as the Uno, or a similar capability I should say. It doesn't have the dedicated power supply. There's a few other sort of things that this one doesn't have, but for what I wanted to do, it would be perfectly capable. And so again, if I sort of compare that to the deck, we could potentially fit that within the bowels of the Yamato. We've certainly got enough room, in the back here, and it's got sort of a large number of pins that we can utilize. So that is still a potential option. The next one is something that I've only come across recently, and these are called seeds. I'll just bring up and it's seed with a triple E, so it's not double E, made by Xiao, and they're SAMD 21, so that's what you sort of need to do a search for. So these are Arduino compatible. These are tiny. I mean, you've literally got a USB socket, some pins down the side, and this, you know, this sort of chip. So this is probably the way I'll be going. Now, the USB is for programming it, but it will also allow you to drive some LEDs directly off the board, so providing power to those LEDs. I don't want to do that just because I think I'll be drawing too much current, so I'll probably be having a separate, you know, sort of essentially a power supply for powering the LEDs. However, the pins on here, I'll be able to control whether the LEDs turn on, turn off, change color, that sort of thing. There are a couple of areas on the bottom here. You see all these sort of pins I've got on the side. I won't actually, these header pins I'll actually take off. I won't be using them. I'll solder directly to the board any wires that I need. And also for the power, I can provide it via these two pads here by soldering wires on. So these things are amazing. I've only had a little bit of experience with them so far, but the fact that they are tiny, I can use multiple ones of these, and you sort of get an idea how small they are. They're going to have no problems, you know, fitting within the bowels of the Yamato. So great option. These aren't as cheap as, say, a Nano. They're a little bit more pricey just because of their size. But for a microprocessor, for what they can do, and for the modeling hobby, they're still a really great, you know, relatively straightforward way of controlling your lighting. And if you're using anything like servo motors and stuff like that, you know, it's really flexible as far as what you can do. So this is probably what I'll be using, and I may even end up using multiple ones. So I may, you know, have one that sort of just does a number of the guns, and I'll have another one that sort of does the engines. I don't know yet. I've sort of got to work that out. So that's just a little bit about the Arduino boards that I'm going to be using, or Arduino compatible boards, I should say. One of the other areas that I want to light up is this side observation deck. So this is just all solid plastic when you first get the kit. So what I've done is I've used a 0.6mm diameter drill bit to drill out the 3 windows and just sort of drill a hole, drill another one next to it, drill another one next to it, and then use a knife to sort of cut it out. There is a massive post that sort of goes here, which I had to grind away first in order to be able to get into that. So what I'll end up doing is I'll use a single, probably an RGB LED, to light that up, and I may have to, I think I'll probably just use some canopy glue to make the clear windows, and then use something to diffuse the light in there. I still haven't quite worked that out yet, but the first step, of course, is to cut out those windows. If you have a look at the other side, which I haven't done yet, you can see that that is just solid plastic, so of course it'd be nice to light that up. The other thing while I'm here that I've done is I have glued these two red bits together. So I've got to do a bit of seam cleanup there, and I've also sort of cut out a lot of this section here, and a lot of that is just so that it's easier to get to this point where I need to attach an LED. So I've sort of cut out all this structure, which there's sort of two pegs that sort of connect the rest of the stuff, but you don't actually need them. So it's mainly for the LED unit that you would put in there and apply to that. The other thing is, you can see I've sort of marked out this area here. I'm going to cut all that out as well. This is sort of reasonably structural, so I want to sort of at least hang on to the bulk of it, but I can cut out a bigger hole in the middle so that I can run wires. Now, because I'm going to have quite a bit of electronics in this kit, I need to work out a way of getting the power from the base, because I want basically the base to have sort of the, whether it's a DC plug pack I use or a 5-volt USB power supply, I want the power going into the base, not into I don't want to plug something in directly to the ship itself. So I don't want to permanently attach the ship to the base. That would probably be the easiest option, but I reckon that I'm going to need to do some sort of painting, potentially touch-ups, all that sort of thing, after I've sort of done the bulk of the wiring. So I do want to kind of keep it separate, the base and the ship separate. And I don't mind the structure of the base. I'm going to do some work on it. I'm going to fill up some of these holes and that sort of thing, but I don't mind the base, so I quite like the shape of it. So I do want to use it. So I've come up with, I think, a solution that may work. It's unproven as yet. But one thing that these are connectors that you may not be aware of. You might have seen them on a lot of gadgets you use, especially phone chargers and that sort of thing. These are called magnetic pogo pins. So you can see the, if it focus, the one on the left's got a pin and the one on the right doesn't. It just has a recess, and they're magnetic, so they sort of snap together. And they have basically two separate contacts, so the middle pin and the outside. And what that means is that you can run power on one side, and then when they're connected, the power travels through to the other side. So these are 5mm magnetic pogo pins, and a lot of the time they're used for sort of testing stuff and that sort of thing, but certainly for phone chargers and lots of little devices you'll find these things in. I just purchased mine on AliExpress. They're nice and relatively cheap, but they're fantastic because it means that I can sort of set up the wiring in the ship. I can attach to one end or one of these pogo pins, and then I can have the other one on the stand, and so it'll just magnetically clip into place. So I think that's probably going to be the best option. Like I said, I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know how well it's going to work. Saying that, I've had to do some work on the stand, so I don't mind the shape of the stand, of these feet or legs or whatever you call them, but I have had to grind out a lot of the space in here, and I've ground out a bit on the top here, which is where the pogo pin will go. So if I quickly show you what this will look like, there will be one wire go down one side and it'll come out the bottom here, and then there'll be one on the other side, so positive and negative. And this top bit, that will be attached to the ship, and then it will just magnetically attach to the base here. So you can do this just with 2 bits of copper, or you can get the copper tape and that sort of thing. I've seen people do it that way, which works just as well, but I actually really like the addition of the magnetism of this, so it sort of locks into place and it makes a lot more of a positive connection. So that's what I'm going to do with these. Now, I haven't worked out whether, I'm pretty sure I'll only need one power source, so I think I'll only need this for one of the legs here. And I need to sort of set it up, and then I will have to work out the position of where to locate it on the ship. And I believe the stand should go something like that, so I'll have to make a little mark or something so I know where to drill a hole for the other one to seat in place. The other thing I'm going to do is, because these legs, because I've sort of had to cut them out like that and grind all this side structure out, makes it look a bit ugly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some styrene, sheet styrene. This is 1mm thick. At the moment this is just roughly cut out. I just traced around it and then cut it out. But what I'll do is both sides I'll use a bit of that, and that will help clean it all up, so that way I'll have a nice clean sort of finish with the wires going through, so they won't be visible and won't have this sort of ugliness showing. The rest of it, I think I'll probably do a little bit of filler work on the top here, I do want to lay down a little bit of felt so that it's not a painted surface on it, sitting on a painted surface. So I'll probably just lay down a little bit of black felt over here. So I do need to make sure this pogo pin is going to be at least a little bit proud of that. But yeah, so that's the plan. I need to sort of make another one of these, put it on the other side, you know, and get that all set up. So that's the plan for getting the power between the Yamato and the base. Okay, I've roughly put in the magnetic pogo pin, so it's actually set in there with 2-part epoxy, but I've put some 1mm styrene stock on the outside. It's still pretty rough, got a lot of cleaning up to do. I haven't sort of glued this into the base or anything, but you get an idea of the wires coming out the bottom, so I've got plenty of room there to hook that into a USB jack for the power. The other thing that I've done is I have added the other part to it in the bottom of the hull here. So I'm going to take this off in a minute, but just to sort of show you how this kind of works is that when you match them up, it actually just magnetically sort of clips in there. So there's a very positive sort of magnetic force there, which is good. And it also means that if I ever need to package this up, you know, to take it somewhere, I can remove it from the base. So makes it a little bit easier. Now if we have a look at what I've done underneath here, unfortunately I won't be able to paint it. It will have to stay that bare metal in appearance, just so that the flow of electricity can obviously work through it. Doesn't bother me so much given that it'll be on the stand most of the time, so it's not an issue. So if I show you what this looks like, so I've been able to put this in this one panel underneath. So I've used 2-part epoxy putty to hold it in place, and now I've got the 2 wires going off. Now these wires are incredibly long, they could be a lot shorter, and I'll probably end up attaching a lot of the circuitry to this part just because it's sort of easy to clip onto the main hull. So that's where I'm up to. I've tested the wires. There is a good flow of you know, electricity through, there's no sort of resistance, so I think it'll work pretty well. You can sort of get an idea of how well that works. The other thing that I'll do is once I've cleaned these up and I've painted them, I'll put a bit of felt on either side here just so that it's not sort of scratching up the paint on the hull. I don't know if I need to do the same thing for the other one yet, because there is still sort of some electronics that I'm working out. I may need to do another one on the other side, so I'll progress with the electronics and see how I go. But if you're looking for a solution of getting power to a model kit that you have that sits on a stand, these magnetic pogo pins are definitely the way to go. A very clean sort of system. I've seen other people sort of plug in wires and all that sort of stuff, but this you don't have to think about, just clips on. I've been sort of setting up or prototyping the lighting for the main bridge, so I thought it'd be good to sort of show some progress and also show how I've set it up for those of you who want to, you know, do something similar. So first of all, I've used an Arduino, and these are the addressable RGB LEDs. So addressable means that I can send a command to each individual LED in a chain, and I can set them up to different colors and, you know, turn them on and off separately. So unlike a normal LED strip you might have where the lights are either on or they're off, or maybe they're doing some pre-programmed pattern, these individual addressable LEDs are incredibly flexible and great for certainly for modeling. Alright, so I've got these hooked up to this little Arduino here. This is all very rough and it's all, you know, pretty much just prototyping, but at least you'll get a bit of an idea of where I'm going. So first of all, you can see we have the green lights of the bridges here, and we also have some green poking up in the top. So previously with the existing LED system you wouldn't see any light come up here at all, so it's good that now that's showing through. And I also wanted to sort of try and show you as best I can is I have one of the cannons set up here with the 0.5mm fibre optics. I just want to show you what it will look like when we put an LED behind it. So a little bit tricky. It's probably going to be really subtle and not that easy to see, but there is actual light coming through those fibre optics. I haven't given it the best clean cut, so that's why they're not showing up that great, but you can kind of see it coming through. I also cut out some holes here on the side. There's like a couple of portholes, so now I've got some green light coming through there. And because these are addressable and they're RGB LEDs, I can set them up to do different things. So for example, I could set them up to flash red, you know, like when they're sort of in an emergency situation or battle stations. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way that's come up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug this and show you how I've sort of set it up on the inside. Now the bridge or the main sort of bridge unit is made up of lots of different parts, and I haven't actually put all of them on, so there are some bits sort of missing on the side here. On this side there's another cannon that's got sort of 3 barrels, if I remember rightly, on here, which I'm not going to light. It's just, I think, going to be a little bit too problematic. I don't know, I'll see how we go. So there's a few details sort of missing from it, but at least you kind of get the idea. So we've got this top, the captain's room. We take that off, and then we have the backing, which actually I might just quickly plug it back in just to show you. I forgot to show you the rear. There's a rear window, so you can see that that will also light up now, because I haven't put the clear styrene piece in there yet, but I will do. But at least you can see the light sort of shines through the back there, so that's good. A lot better than just a solid bit of plastic. Okay, so I'm going to take some of these detail pieces off. Try to take them off, and then this back piece. So if I gently slide that out, you'll get an idea of what's going on here. So basically it's 2 LEDs sort of positioned here, and they're actually stuck. I've super glued them to the clear plastic light pipes, and for the guns I'll be gluing in, once I've got them set up properly, I'll be gluing one on each side here. So let's take the light pipes out, and I'm just going to use a toothpick to kind of ease them out from the front. Okay, so you can sort of see, you know, I showed before I had to cut out quite a bit from these wings, and they're starting to split, so I am going to have to glue all this in place once I've sort of got it painted and everything. I think in the case of the bridge, it's going to be really quite tricky to sort of mask off all these areas properly, so I think I might end up just painting the pieces first and then assembling it. Alright, but if we have a look at the way these light pipes work, you can see what I've done is I've stuck the LED to the bottom and the back of the base of it, so that way the light sort of travels through. And I've just used super glue. It's frosted up the back of the clear plastic. That's fine, it actually helps with the diffusion a little bit. It doesn't affect the clarity at the front where it really counts. So yeah, super glue was just a nice way of doing it. You can see each of these LEDs has 4 leads coming off it, so they're not like your standard sort of LEDs. And I've got a really technical drawing here of how these things sort of work. So they have this little notch on the front. So this is the front of the LED. This is where it sort of lights up. And it's got this little notch here, so you know which pins to hook up. And these pins, I just bend them down, and then I find it easier to solder to them. So starting at the, we'll start at the top right. We've got the ground, so that's where your negative goes from your power source. In this case, I've got it hooked up to the 3.3 volts on the Arduino, but I'll probably set it up with its own power supply. and then you've got the positive on the lower left. So you've got your sort of power, you know, on diagonally opposite sides. And then, so that's no different to what you would have for a normal LED. But the main difference with addressable ones is that you set up a chain of LEDs. So you will have a signal coming in, and that's what this D in is. So you'll have a signal coming in from your Arduino to say, I want this particular one to turn on, turn red, whatever. And then in order to be able to send a command to the next or subsequent LEDs, you've got a D out. So you basically have your signal coming in, and then you'll have one going out. And you can hook up as many of these as you want. So in the case of like the bridge, I'll probably end up with 4 or 5, and it means I'll be able to tell each one independently what to do. So again, just that whole, you know, a lot of flexibility there. Alright, so that's sort of the lighting of the bridge. That's probably as much as I'll show you there, just because, yeah, I think a lot of the final setup of it will probably happen when I get to sort of final assembly. At the moment, everything's kind of, you know, held in by hopes, dreams, and a little bit of bubblegum. So it'll be a lot better once I sort of get the actual construction of it set up. I want to light up these side windows. Now you can see I've sort of cut out the windows. The other thing that I've done as well is, because we don't get a clear piece of styrene to go in there, let's see if we can, no, it's not going to see it, but what I ended up using was some of this, which is Testors Clear Part Cement and Window Maker, and it's basically a really I guess refined white glue or PVA, so it dries clear and it's quite viscous, so it means that it'll sit in those gaps there, and once it dries clear, so you get these sort of nice clear windows. Now, if I show you the other one, I've actually masked these off, so that'll be ready for painting. Now as far as how I'm going to light it, it's going to be pretty straightforward. I think what I'll do is that you can see that sort of recess in there. What I'll end up doing is using a bit of styrene sheet to essentially create a bit of a wall on the back. So something like that, and then just feed the LED through and have it mounted on the other side. So I think that should be pretty straightforward. The other thing is, if we look at the front wave motion gun, I've cut out a heap more sort of plastic in here, and I'll probably keep going until I you know, maximise the space I've got. But basically one of those RGB LEDs will be attached there just using some clear glue, maybe some super glue. It doesn't matter if it frosts over, because basically, you know, as long as the light comes through at the front. I'll mask this off so it's ready for painting. The other thing that I've done is with these stands that I've modified with the magnetic pogo pins, it's actually quite rough the way I've sort of done it. You can see I've sanded a bit, but I suspect that when I paint it, you're going to be able to see that it is basically 3 parts all sandwiched together. So what I've done is I've taken some 0.25mm plastic styrene just in a sheet, and I've stuck it around the edges, and I'll continue to do that all the way around. So that way, once I sort of trim off the excess, file it back, there might be a little bit of putty work, but I think it'll give me a lot better result at the end of it, hopefully. Fingers crossed. So I'm working on that as well. I think I'm going to leave the video there. There's still obviously a lot more work to be done as far as the lighting and what I have to set up, but this video is getting quite lengthy. So until the next video, I'll catch you later.